Ladies and gentlemen, big hairy news.
Hey, kia ora koutou e te whānau. Welcome back to another edition of a really big hairy news tonight. Look at all the boxes, like Chewie said when we came in. Really big hairy news. Thank you all for being with us. As you can see, we have a very full show tonight. We have Mihingarangi Forbes with us, Annabelle with us, and Eugene Bingham, who little note for people out there, I went to school with. So nice to see you again, Eugene. We're both about as grey as each other. That's about right. That's perfect. Well done. Sacred Heart Old Boys. And we're here to talk. So I would just say a huge thanks to all of our patrons to get us off and get us running. You guys who do what you do to help us do what we do. This is the kind of stuff you are supporting us and giving us a chance to do. If anyone wants to be a part of what we do, then you can head to patreon.com/big hairy news. And Chewie, this was us on Friday night at our meetup in Auckland at the Radio Awards, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff in there as well. Patreon.com/big hairy news. Kia ora whānau. Welcome to our little strange broadcasty thing that we do. I feel like it's the first day of school and we should all go around holding hands and like say who we are and why we're here. You know how you do that when you're there? So why don't we do this? Because especially you, Mihi, most of our listeners, or all of our listeners will probably know who you are and what you do. But Annabelle and Eugene, why don't you tell us a bit about your plug-in to, in particular, the documentary we're going to talk about tonight with David Seymour and more. Annabelle, do you want to give us a bit of a lowdown?
Kia ora, I'm Annabelle Lee Mather. I'm Mihi's work wife, just civil union at this point, but we're looking to get a bit more serious. We have our own production company together called Aotearoa Media Collective, and we're funded to create 4 documentaries a year for Mata, including this one. So I do a bit of directing and writing and whatever other bits and pieces need to be done, research and that sort of thing.
And what about you, Eugene? What is your role in this?
So I don't know if you guys are the wives. What am I? I don't know. I'm kind of like the spare wheel, I guess. So yeah, that's right. So I'm nominally called the executive producer, but I guess I'm there to help out in all sorts of different ways. And yeah, I've been working with these two wahine toa for about 18 months on Mata and in the amazing work they do.
And how about you, Mihi? Do you want to share some thoughts for the whānau about who you are, what you're about, what we're here to talk about tonight?
Kia ora, ko Mihingarangi aho. Yes, I'm Annabelle's work wife and Eugene's throuple. Have worked with these two for many decades now. Eugene said 18 months, but actually I used to worship their work when I worked at Campbell Live, and they were up in the ivory towers at TV3 doing 60 Minutes in 2020 and all those kinds of shows. And yeah, so always admired Eugene's work. And when he became free, Annabelle and I grabbed him, tackled him and said, come and work with us. So yeah, Annabelle and I first worked together at Native Affairs back in the Rā, when you could build a Twitter audience, and they were beautiful, loving people, and make ginger cakes and flowers and the rest of it. Wow. Yeah, and we've just continued to work really independently of major platforms, but of course with major platforms that carry our kaupapa. So kia ora to RNZ for carrying our mata kaupapa at the moment, and the iwi networks, they all carry our kaupapa as well. Yep, that's us.
For you guys who are watching live, as always, we'll take your questions and your comments, but I want to make this really, really clear. Often when we have groups in to talk about their work, people will put through questions and stuff via super chats. We appreciate all of that, but I want to make it very blunt at the start of the show. A super chat does not guarantee it's going to be used. So I'm just putting it out there so people don't go, hey, I've got a question, and they super chat it and we don't get to it. So just making it really clear at the start. You know, you don't need to do them. If you want to do them, up to you, but it doesn't guarantee it's going to be asked or said, just so you know. Chewie, I guess that makes us work husbands. I'm just trying to figure this out where we fit in this thing. Is there anything you want to share about what we're about to do, or anything to the whānau?
This is going to be pretty spectacular. I think it's no secret that a lot of us absolutely loved that documentary on David Seymour and Atlas that you did. We have been buzzing about it since it dropped, so to have you guys here to speak on it is a real treat. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, cool. All right, let's rip into it. In fact, the first question is one that actually just came up from what you said, Annabelle. You're charged to do 4 documentaries. And how do you pick your subjects? Is David Seymour a bit of a love-hate fest that you want to do? But where do you find the stories, and how do you pick what you want to actually feature?
Some of them are, a lot of them happen by good luck, or some of them are issues that we have been thinking about for a long time and wanting to tackle. I think our perpetual leases story that we put out last year is an example of that. Of course, we're Māori journalists first and foremost, and currently there is no bigger story in Aotearoa, for over the last 2 years than the Treaty Principles Bill, the prospect of the Treaty Principles Bill, and then the course of the Treaty Principles Bill. So naturally, looking at David Seymour, looking at the ACT Party and their motivations, their origin story was a natural choice for us in terms of being able to do a long form story about it.
And what about you, Mihi? You've had interactions with Mr. Seymour before. What dragged you back to his story for a second time?
Well, I guess we're probably the only group in Māori broadcasting that's lucky enough to do the long form investigations, if you like. We've come from weekly, which is the hui and te ao with moana and marae, but the opportunity to do something that's around 30 to 40 minutes is quite different, so we're very lucky to do that. So I guess what we have to do is we have this kind of kaupapa where we don't bark at every truck that goes past, like news does, and so we have to really sit on it and think, what is the story that will hold, what will be the documentary that we make that will be a slow burn and still clicking it up and being watched in 1, 2, 3, 4 years, real kaupapa, like the perpetual leases, which have been like that for 120 years, so it's a story that's not getting old. With this one, I guess watching, I was invited to MC or coordinate one of the tents, if you like, at the King's Hui in January 2024. Yep, that was 2024, at the beginning of the year. And I went along to Ngārua Wāhia like tens of thousands of other Māori. And I thought, whoa, this is getting a lot of attention. And then following that, it was a beautiful kaupapa. And then following that, there were a number of those around the motu. Christchurch held one, then one in Te Tai Rāwhiti. And there was a real momentum that started to build in opposition or concern against the Treaty Principles Bill. And it started to really gain momentum. And so as long form journalists making kaupapa that are long form, we kind of helicopter up and say, we can't do something for next week or for next month, but we have to think about what might this look like in 6 months or a year's time. So we just started keeping a real close eye on it, preparing for it. And we wanted to know where the ideas behind the Treaty Principles Bill came from, what was the thinking around it, and had it, and who were the people that were raising it, which was David Seymour and the ACT Party. So we wanted to look a little bit closer about where that political agenda might be coming from. And so, yeah, we just really did a lot of research, got deep, read a lot of books, and started to shape the documentary. And, you know, by that time, you know, we'd travelled to Wellington to the Hikoi, and I went to the 2004 Seabed and Foreshore march, and it was nothing like that. And at that point, we kind of knew that this was going to be something massive, ginormous, and it was. And we started filming back then. We didn't quite know what it was. We were still, you know, trying to work out what the backstory was, and we thought actually probably a nice timeline would be, we knew that the Deputy Prime Minister would be switching, and we thought maybe we'll try and hit that as, you know, if you needed to have a time frame of any kind. Sometimes you need to give yourself a time frame.
Yeah, but is that what it was? Like, because I wrote down like 2 weeks ago, it came out 2 weeks ago, and the Hikoi is when you kind of laid the first idea down. So that's a 7-month process from initial ideas through to production. And was the initial ideas fulfilled, or did the story change as you went along that time period?
I think with us, like sometimes we will film a story the year before, knowing that it's got such long legs and it's going to take such a long time, or it needs a period of time in between for us to get there. And so this was one of those ones that sometimes you just have to invest a little bit or put some effort into something, and it might not turn out. And so it's never like a story where we're like, this has to happen and we have to get this out. Sometimes we invest in our time and our resource into stories and they don't eventuate, and that's okay. So this one, it was just, Annabelle was talking before about our 4 a year. We try and do one political, one crime. We try and do one whenua or environment, and one a bit more joyful. And so this was, we thought, what would be the political story of the year? And this clearly was the political story of that year and has turned into this year as well.
Yeah.
We haven't quite nailed the joyful one yet, ever.
In my head,
Well, yeah, that's true. It's not quite. Well, we start off with, we think it's going to be joyful, and then, you know, lo and behold, a story in the middle of it turns out and it's not so joyful. It's, anyway.
I'm just going to try something, because I'm just going to try and square up the screen a bit to see if this looks better. I haven't done this before, so I'm going to give it a go.
Oh.
That's a bit better, eh? Yeah, that's a bit better. We'll stay like that. Sorry, Eugene, off you go, sir.
Just going to say, the story sort of this particular story, like all stories, sort of unfold as we go along. So we don't set out with like, this is what the story is going to be. It unfolds based on who we talk to, and that's exactly what happened with this one. The more people we talk to, the more we got an idea of what the story was, really. So,
yeah, Chewie, do you want to jump in, sir? Any thoughts around that?
Is the lack of the joyful story, like, I don't know, Marta with the expose on the dark underbelly of puppies, is that how it sort of goes on you? You try to bring a story to light and going, this will be a nice fluffy one, and you just uncover something horrific.
Yeah, that's exactly what happens.
Yeah, we did a story a couple of years ago with, we decided that we really wanted to do a story about, reconnecting people with their whakapapa. And we met a remarkable woman called Jenny Small, and we helped her to do that. But along the way, we discovered that part of her story was that as a 13-year-old, she was shipped off to Lake Alice, where she received shock treatment and years of abuse. So with joy, as there always is, there's pain, but those subjects are important and worth exploring. So
yeah. Hey, I want to ask you some questions specifically about the documentary. We might go through a few bits and bobs and see where that leads us as well. The first question is about this lovely young man, Leo Malloy. For those people who have seen the documentary, you'll know what he's all about. A lawyer and someone who signed up to be and attempted to be an ACT MP, an ACT candidate. It all kind of fell apart when he sort of, how did you say it to me on the phone, Chewie? Discovered who ACT really was, something like that. It might not be
I
quite
think
by that.
worked out what party he was in.
Worked out what party he was in.
Used.
Based around a comment he makes, which we'll get to at the end of the podcast, how do you guys, I guess it's with him, but with anyone, how do you guys sit and make sure someone's story is credible to you? Or do you just let them tell it and leave it to the audience?
Shall I go?
Um,
Bells, here you go.
Firstly, you have to meet with someone, you have to sit with them, talk with them, get to know them. You've got to do your homework. You've got to do some research on them, ask around about them. But, like all journalists, you get a gut feeling pretty quickly. And I think it's fair to say that, Leo, who is a lawyer by trade, struck us as a very credible person. Obviously, the ACT party itself has a pretty stringent vetting system for its candidates, and had made it all the way through to be selected to run for Northcote. So we knew that, already there'd been some homework done on his background, and we did ours also. But he struck us as someone who genuinely believes in the principles of the free market. Initially we wondered, is this someone who just went in there to cause trouble, to sort of get amongst it and find out what was really going on with ACT? But that's not who he is at all. I think he genuinely believes in the ethos of a guy like Roger Douglas. He believed in ACT, and I think he came away from his experience with ACT, somewhat disappointed, and that's what prompted him to speak out.
I think when we found the Northcote candidate debates, which we found, he didn't provide any of those for us. You really could see that he was an ACT guy. He was selling the ACT policies as everyone else was in the candidate debates, and he believed it. And he does believe in a free market, and he believes that the treaty and free market can coexist. And those are his and he provides we had lots of robust debates with him around that, that obviously weren't in the interview. But but particularly for me, it was the way he performed in the Northcote candidate debate over the shore, and a couple of others.
So he's a true believer by that. That shows you who he is and what he's saying. Because I thought it was interesting when he talked about in the documentary about the free market. He's like, well, when Maori first interacted with Europeans, they traded. It was quite an interesting. I actually heard ever anyone justify a free market like that before. It was an interesting thought to hear.
I think that when you descend from the tupuna that he does, which is hardcore Northlanders, and he knows his whakapapa really well, and they are rangatira, and then you have a different, that's his unique perspective of how trade and the treaty worked, based on his research history, stuff that is factual, and the way that he then fills in the rest of it. It's quite an interesting story when you hear him speak about those early days trade and what he considers the free market.
How did you find him?
He actually contacted us.
Okay.
Yeah, he'd seen some of our other work, and it just so happened that we were already looking at the treaty principles bill and preparing to cover it. So the universe aligned, and he stepped forward and into our story.
I was interested in one of the things he talked about. He talked about the school of practical politics, or you guys talked to him about that. Is that, and I know we're going to talk about, for example, hopefully Tom Flanagan shortly, but was that an ACT idea? Like, is that an ACT initiative, or is that something that's come internationally to ACT as something that like-minded parties do overseas? Do you guys know?
I'm not sure, actually. Do you know, Annabelle?
In terms of the School of Practical Politics?
Yeah. Like, is
If
that
that's something if that happens overseas, I'm not sure if that's something that happens internationally. I imagine it probably is, but I think it speaks to how well organised the ACT Party is. Their ability to hold 8 workshops, to carefully vet through their candidates, to host these discussions, to give them prescribed readings, really talks about what a well-oiled machine the ACT Party is. Whether that's something that they've picked up from, through their relationships with other organisations, I would imagine so. But it's not a bad idea for a political party. Probably something that they all should be doing.
Yeah, Chewie, jump in, sir.
Well, on that point, I think we've commented on the show before that one of the biggest achievements of ACT, when they started getting more MPs on the roster and in the House, that David Seymour's biggest achievement was keeping their sometimes insane comments out of the media and out of the public eye. It's pretty clear that they do run a tight ship.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you learn that through Leo's interview, when he wants to ask questions and he wants to have discussions around things that are not in the booklet, if you know what I mean. And he feels like there's no space for him to have his own whakaaro or his own wānanga, and it's kind of by the book. Yeah.
Is that different from any other political party, though? Like, we were, I
don't
say Brooke Van Velden, but then that's ACT, isn't it? Talking about, I have a, like on Q&A, we go, I have a loyalty to the government. Are other, like, someone in Labour going to have the same sort of by the book, or are they going to have, we had Marilyn Waring on a few weeks ago doing this People's Select Committee, and she said that, like in her day, like she crossed the floor for nukes and this person crossed the floor for that, and it was in the 80s, it was sort of like that, and she was kind of hinting it's not like that nationally anymore. But is it like that anywhere anymore, or do they all have to play by the book?
Well, Willie Jackson doesn't. Willie Jackson speaks
Just thinking that.
Speaks his own mind,
Yep.
and he's, I think, in the last couple of budgets, when Labour was through, if he didn't get what he wanted, he would. He freely spoke about his expectations and things like that. But he's not the only one. In that last Labour-led government, we would have interviews with, on particular things, I guess. But yeah, I mean, I'm not sure that other parties have the same discipline. Obviously not, because they get themselves into trouble, don't they? You've got politicians getting into trouble, and then that's over.
And this government did leak like a sieve for the first 3 months they were in. Everything was coming out of the cabinet, wasn't it? We found out all about them.
I mean, but you just have to look at previous governments. The Green Party, the Labour Party, they lost MPs, and that's probably, you could argue, that's lack of discipline.
Yeah. All right. I wanted to ask you about this fine fellow, Professor Tom Flanagan. I say fine fellow with parentheses around it, just in case anyone's wondering.
Big ones.
He seemed very open and comfortable chatting. I guess I'm kind of going, I'm not trying to say you guys had an angle, it's not that at all, but it seems that his story wasn't going to be looked at well within your story, but he seemed very kind of relaxed and happy to talk about the situation. I noted down here at some stage he said savagery, although we wouldn't use that term today. I thought to myself, he might kind of still use that term in his own private life, perhaps. Maybe he's saying we don't use that publicly. Was he easy to get? What did you find out about Professor Tom Flanagan from your interactions?
Well, when we came across that name from Leo's discussions with us about the School of Practical Politics, we of course started to have a look at who he was, and you don't have to Google far to see some of the controversies he's been involved in. But we genuinely wanted to know what's the, what are his views? What does he know? Does he know David Seymour? Did he have any interactions? Does he have any thoughts? At that stage, it was still quite early on, wasn't it? And we were just going into it with an open mind, with a view to find out what we could. And so we got hold of him, asked him to have a Zoom meeting with us. And yeah, he jumped on. He seemed very open. He spoke quite openly. Some of the things he said were surprising to us. But we weren't there at that stage anyway, to challenge him or we were just on a fact-finding mission. And so we just let him speak, and you heard what he had to say, or later on, as you saw in the documentary, we went back to him and put to him some of the comments that others had made and the views that people had expressed about his views, and he strongly rejected that feeling. But we'd also asked for another interview with him, and he wasn't keen. So then we were left with that interaction with him, and that's what we played in the documentary.
So he wasn't happy with maybe how it turned out, and so he wouldn't come back on? Is it a fair paraphrase?
Well, he wasn't happy with what other people were saying about him.
Right.
When because we had to put to him, out of fairness, what was being said about him by others, including, Leo describing, his alarm at some of what Professor Flanagan had written about Indigenous policies, and Nicholas. Well, it wasn't so much Nicholas, was it? Who it was?
Hayden King.
Hayden King at the Yellowhead Institute had said about him. So, in fairness, we put those comments to him, and he wasn't too happy about that. But he sent us a reply, which we included in the documentary.
Yeah.
His initial Zoom. I mean, Eugene reached out to him first, and he agreed to the Zoom. And then when he turned on the Zoom, we asked him if I could join the Zoom as well to listen, and he agreed to that, and there was no issue. We literally didn't ask him very many questions at all. He just spoke, and so we just listened. And then after about 40 minutes, he'd kind of wrapped up and had enough, and we said, thanks so much. And so he was very comfortable, in my view anyway, that we just had a very long discussion about his political views and where they'd come from, and the work he had done in the Harper government, and with all the think tanks that the Frontier Centre and the others. So as Eugene said, it wasn't until we had to put other people's opinions to him that he decided, he didn't want to talk anymore.
Eugene, you said some of his views were surprising to you. Like what? What was it? What did he say that was surprising to you?
I think that he had some interesting opinions on Indigenous policies, and his views about what was civilization and what wasn't. He certainly, he said those openly. But yeah, they were surprising to us. But as I said, that wasn't our job at that point to challenge him on them. But we certainly included the views of others in the documentary who did challenge him on them.
I was interested as well. He talked about setting up the ecosystem, the conservative ecosystem, more of a general conversation, because that seems to have continued on around the world. There seems to be more money on the kind of conservative side than other. What do you guys think that is? Why do you think it seems that the conservative side always seems to have kind of $10 to the progressive side's $1? Anyone got any ideas around that? I saw a smirk, Mihi. I saw a smirk from Mihi then. I don't know what that was about, but
no, I just think it's organised, right? When you're organised, things work out better for you. And when you consider the ecosystem that Tom Flanagan talked about, it's a very good, exactly that ecosystem. One looks after the other, and it's kind of like AI. Really, it cuts. The AI or the ecosystem does all the benign kind of administrative work, and people have enough time and resource to get on with the stuff that matters.
Yeah. Chewie, got some thoughts here?
David has bitten very hard at anyone that wants to bring up Atlas. He's called it a conspiracy theory when you initially raised it with him, which was an interesting position because there were photos of him participating in Atlas activities and organizations, as if he thought he could get away with it. Is this what sort of tweaked your interest to push a little bit harder on this?
Well, the Atlas wasn't. I mean, it was the fact that he called us conspiracy theorists for asking him questions about his political whakapapa, which drew us back into the realm of what he'd done earlier in that previous interview with Mihi, accusing her of the pizza gate and left or something, wasn't it? So
yeah.
I think you know, Atlas was not initially in this documentary. That wasn't what any of us were looking at. We were looking at Te Ao Māori's resistance or concerns to the Treaty Principles Bill and what might be behind that, and what might be the political agenda that was, trying to, change some. We'll look at the principles again, and so there's a little piece to Cam in the documentary where I'm in green, and I'm reading out what the first response from the ACT party is when we first went to them, and they raised the conspiracy theory thing, and so we have to say exactly what their response is, but because it wouldn't have made sense, because no one would know what the conspiracy theory was, we had to say they're relating this to this interview that we did in 2024. So that's how that got raised again.
So we included it because it demonstrated how he chose to respond to questions once again. So rather than deal with questions, this was how he responded. So that will with the party. And so that's why that was included. It wasn't, as he says, it wasn't actually part of our initial thinking at all.
I agree though, Chewie. It is the response in that first interview with Mihi, I found interesting too, and I've wondered, about it over the course of making the documentary, because Atlas is a reputable organisation. It's 500 think tanks operating all around the world, doing all sorts of interesting things. So I mean. Clearly, it's an organisation that is able to, educate people on how to campaign effectively, how to build their own ecosystems, how to create effective policy or be an effective policy maker in terms of being able to get your policy through that represents your support base or your areas of interest. So I'm not sure why it keeps being positioned as a conspiracy theory. It's clearly more of a coordination theory than a conspiracy theory. But yeah, I thought it was an interesting response to it, and I'm not quite sure what the thinking is behind it.
I think that's kind of what I keep coming back to, is Atlas itself don't seem to be concerned about the links between them, and quite happily say, oh yes, he did this MBA thing for us, here's a couple of photos with us, he's on our website. It's not exactly the in the shadows organization that he seems to want to imply that it is, that we think it is. It's a very strange reaction.
Yeah.
So in that interview with Mihi, I jotted it down because it came up again. I read about this conspiracy theory. I just think no one has asked David Seymour the obvious question about Atlas. Mr. Seymour, when you got your MBA from Atlas, what one or two things that you learnt whilst doing that MBA? I just go around the all, does it exist, does it not? It's like, you did it. What did you get out of it, Mr. Seymour? And see what he's got to say. I wanted to also come back to Tom Flanagan, because Tom Flanagan is connected to the Frontier Centre for Public Policy. And when he was talking about savagery, although we wouldn't use that term today, he also talked about inviting them into the tent, inviting, the savagery people into the tent. In other words, why don't you come and be a part of Western civilization? A question to all three of you, and I'll start with you, Mihi. I could be naive here, but it feels like Atlas hasn't quite got its hooks into New Zealand, like, for example, around The Voice in Australia or other places. And I just wonder if, because many of us in New Zealand don't want to invite Māori to our tent, we actually want to go into theirs. And that feels like it's a different vibe from like non-Indigenous to Indigenous people. Is there something a little bit different? Not saying that we have no problems, in Indigenous issues in New Zealand, but because it feels slightly different to the rest of the world, is it harder for Atlas to get its claws in? Because I'm happy to sit at Māori's table. They don't have to sit at mine, and I think there are lots of New Zealanders like that.
Yeah, I don't know, because there was a part in that Zoom with Dr. Flanagan where he was talking about, I can't, honestly, don't paraphrase me, but it was like a comparison against Indigenous Canadians versus Indigenous Māori around, did we put it in there? I don't know if we did, but it was like, did you guys have, did you trade? What did you trade? Did you have, did you have stones? There was a discussion around what is when you're savage and when you're not savage, and maybe that Māori weren't quite savage enough, or something like that. And obviously, we were just listening, so we didn't challenge anything, but we were like, okay. So his perception, I think, is that we weren't the same. So Indigenous Canadians weren't the same as Māori here. So perhaps maybe that maybe we have a better relationship with Pākehā. When I think about broadcasting, we are on a pedestal to the rest of the world, and they used to come to New Zealand to learn how to set up their broadcasters. We used to lead, the WIPN, the World Indigenous Broadcasting Network, and things like that. So yeah, perhaps that's the perception, is that we're a little bit, we're doing better or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, and I'm always really careful with this conversation. Doing better doesn't mean we're doing fine. Like, there is lots of improvement.
Absolutely not. I mean, that's the whole thing. That's this. I mean, this goes to that question line the other day in Parliament where Marnie Dunlop asked about Māori funding, and David Seymour responded saying it was a racist question, but we're asking about the inequities. Really what's on the table is how are we going to close the gaps of this inequity between Māori as treaty signatories to the treaty and the Crown. I'm definitely not saying that there's not work to be done. There's absolutely work to be done. And this is the whole problem with comparing Indigenous people to Indigenous people, their rights to each other's rights, and the failures of the Crown in those countries to each other.
Yeah. Annabelle, got any thoughts around that?
I think we have less vested interests here in terms of, billionaires or, billion-dollar companies that are wanting to drill and all of those sorts of things. So I think that's part of it. I think that, we are a smaller country. We are a smaller Te Ao Māori is more interwoven, through our family ties, our iwi ties, and so we're able to respond and coordinate much quicker. We have iwi who have capacity, who can support their people to respond to these sorts of issues. So I think that gives Māori a head start in terms of being able to parry a concept like the Treaty Principles Bill, as opposed to tangata whenua in Australia who, are up against a lot of big investors who have a vested interest in being able to minimise Indigenous rights over there. So, it's two different playing fields here, I think.
Yeah, interesting. Chewie?
Yeah, I mean that is the danger, isn't it? We all look for parallels and experiences where sometimes there isn't a parallel there. Certainly some of those comments really comes close to that old school racial science of like grading Indigenous populations according to how noble they seem. And it's jarring to me to see that persist. That there's still some people that are, well, I know I can't say this, but I'm going to skirt around it, like we've seen in the discussions, especially from Canada and that sort of thing. Well, I just saw a comment fly by in the chat that some of the experience here in New Zealand is down to the fact that Māori are 20% of our population now and growing. You can't transplant that over into other countries, where it seems like a lot of these groups, like Atlas and like some of the lessons that David Seymour's learned overseas, he wants to transport those ideas over onto here. Do you think that he's lost his moment because of the strengthening in Te Ao Māori and especially for Pākehā, how we associate New Zealand with Māori culture, Māori language, Māori performance, art, everything? Do you think he'll be able to bring those ideas over as easily as it looks like he hopes he can?
I think he's certainly said that he's not going to stop, does he? But I think the size of the resistance, the ability of Te Ao Māori and allies to mobilise and to resist and make their voices heard may have surprised him. So, but he certainly hasn't. Everything he said since the bill was voted down, he doesn't sound like he's backing down, does he?
No.
He's going to make it, I'm sure, a campaign issue. I think, just adding to that previous conversation, the other thing that we have to acknowledge is the te tiriti. We have te tiriti, and we have to acknowledge those rangatira who did sign up to it and fought for it in those early days, and then we went through those generations of subjugation, but we've seen the resistance to those acts of colonisation since, in the last couple of decades and previous decades. And so I think that's definitely a factor in why there is that difference in what we experience here versus what might be experienced elsewhere around the world. And we've got generations, haven't we, of people who are prepared to stand up and make their voices heard, and to campaign against the feats that they don't agree with, and we have to acknowledge those people. And I think that that's certainly maybe something that doesn't make it as easy as it might have appeared in other countries such as Canada to enact those sorts of policies that maybe he wanted to. But don't forget too that it wasn't a easy going in Canada. There's certainly been resistance over there as well. We have to acknowledge that.
I think the work that successive governments have done around treaty settlements, and in particular the National Party through the late 90s, when they really got the ball rolling with Waikato and Tainui, has changed a lot in the last couple of decades, and Māori are just in different places now and spaces. And there was I've forgotten what that was called, but it was a big international business thing that the Prime Minister put on earlier this year here in Auckland. And I remember Tukuroirangi Morgan, who stood next to the Prime Minister actually and said, "We're open for business. You don't have to go through these guys, come straight to us now." And that's probably the difference, is that there's some agency that iwi have here that they don't have in other countries. And I'm not saying all Māori, because we know that we have such a huge the vast majority are not living at large like some iwi, some Māori are in this country. So yeah, but I think when you've got voices like that, like Tuku Morgan and all those other iwi leaders who are just kind of speaking as they do, that kind of poses a question, poses a problem to that line of thinking.
I'm wondering if we can talk briefly about residential schools and the information that came out in the doco. I just wanted to get some clarity on that first of all. There seems like there was two parts of the documentary that really kind of shook me, and one of them was the residential schools. I was trying to anchor it to think, how will I talk about this? How will I explain it? And I thought Indigenous schools, is it more like this stolen generation from Australia? And when I heard that about the 6,000 residential school kids that have died in the residential schools in Canada, I thought, is this more like the abuse in state care situation that New Zealanders had, to try and figure out a way to anchor exactly what it was? Because when we heard the speechwriter that's talked about in the documentary, Paul Bunner, I think it is, basically say that there's a whole bunch of myths around this, downplaying it, and David Seymour then agreed, I think that was a really, unless I've got slightly wrong, correct there, I think that was a really huge part pointing to who David certainly was, if not who he still is, if those are his beliefs, that the what happened in the past in Canada, and if it is like the abuse and state care situation, those residential schools, he was like, no, let's not overplay this one. This is okay. We'll move on. Can you help me like figure that out, Mihi? What have I missed, and what can you tell us about the residential schools part of the documentary?
I'm not an expert on residential schools, and actually Annabelle and I had this discussion the other day about, like the timeframes of the stolen generation, the scoop. Is it the scoop?
60 scoop.
Yeah, the 60 scoop, and what happened here with state abuse. It doesn't always line up, but we were just saying, they are all kind of the same thing, and when you look at them individually, like you look into Australia's stolen generation, it is what it is. And then you look at ours and it is what it is. And you go to Canada, and there'll be other places all around the world. But when you start to look at them as one, they seem to kind of feel like they come together a little bit more in terms of what was behind them. And so, I mean, that part of the documentary was just, we found a website. Was it a website?
You mean the C2C journal?
Yeah, a journal, sorry, which was an online website, which the Frontier Centre published, and I guess they had different editors all the time. So during that period of time, we found the article. And that's what you do when you research. You're just constantly researching, finding names, looking into the name, and then that one just came about, and we saw that it created a whole lot of unrest between Indigenous people in Australia and Canada and others, and we just kind of we just read more about it and about this person Paul Bunner, and we just had to put that to David Seymour, which we did, and that was his response, which you saw on the bridge.
Yeah, well, the thing is, on the bridge, as you're saying, when they released that footage, like ACT released it, 4, 5, 6 weeks ago, it kind of didn't make sense. But once you watch the documentary and you go, that's more making sense. So it seems that there was a political speechwriter in Canada that played down the seriousness of the residential schools, and then David Seymour basically said, yes, I agree with his downplaying. Is that a fair kind of synopsis of what's been highlighted?
I think he became a speechwriter later on, to be fair.
Okay.
I think that particular article was written, a long time before he became a speechwriter. But interestingly, one of Professor Flanagan's latest books is called Grave Error, and it's about residential schools, and in a similar theme, challenges the narrative about, unmarked graves and the experience of Indigenous Canadians within those schools.
So he's still downplaying it to this day.
Professor Flanagan has written a book about it. Yeah.
Okay.
Not Paul Bunner, but
Gotcha.
Professor Flanagan, and as Hayden says, there is, residential school denialism, as they term it, is an issue that pops up from time to time in Canada.
Yeah, Hayden, that's
You
Hayden
can
King,
read
right?
about it. You can read about the denialism. There's plenty of articles about it, and there's plenty of people that believe that it didn't happen. But as Hayden, who's the Indigenous academic in the documentary, says, he says that the memories of those who survived is so strong that it's kind of overshadows the doubt.
Yeah. I've got a couple of little clips I want to play from the doco before we say goodnight, as long as you guys are okay for another 5-10 minutes. Is that good? We're all right? Chewie, before we do that, sir, do you want to jump in with any other questions or comments about what we've done so far? Oh, can't hear you, Chewie. Don't know what's happening there. I can't
I'll
hear
turn my
you.
mic on.
That's right,
I said I'm looking forward to seeing what clips you've selected.
Oh, okay. Well, we should just get into that now. One of the reasons I asked you about Leo Foley's credibility is the claim he makes at the end. So I'm going to play this so we can all see what he says, and then we can talk about it, because a lot of us have been saying what David Seymour is going to do could lead to some very serious outcomes. And I guess what Leo's about to tell us is, according to his testimony, David Seymour is aware of the serious outcomes. He's not ignorant to them.
And his question to me was, if you were in charge of the Maori portfolio, the treaty portfolio, how would you deal with robust discussions with iwi representatives or Māori, especially when we're actually campaigning on an anti-co-governance sort of basis? I asked him if he wanted a straight answer or a rehearsed answer, and he said, give me your honest answer. And I actually said, you cannot and you should not deal with Te Tiriti in that way. It's something that is it's a constitutional basis of this country. And I said that for the party to approach it in that light would cause chaos across all of Māoridom.
How did he respond?
Well, he looked up at me, and his answer shocked me, to be honest, because he looked me square in the eye and he said it would be more than just chaos in the streets, Leo. And I asked him, I said, what do you mean by that? And he actually said it would cause a civil war. And that basically left me dumbfounded. I didn't quite know what to make of that.
So, according to that testimony, David Seymour knew that Treaty Principles Bill could lead to civil war. Do we understand that to mean, when we think civil war America, actual fighting in the streets? Is it metaphorical? How did you take that, Mihi?
Should we talk about, do you want to talk about how we dealt with that comment?
Yeah, please.
Do you want to talk, Bells, about the process?
Yeah, we spoke to two other people who confirmed for us that Leo was so concerned about it at the time, back in, was it 2023, I think, that he had relayed that alleged conversation with them.
Mm-hmm.
So that gave us confidence that, we could broadcast it. But it was also very important to us, because it is a serious allegation, that we give Mr. Seymour the opportunity to respond to it. And as you can see in the documentary, he denied it. So, is it possible that it was said, but it was said flippantly? Was it not said at all? Was it misheard? Was it exactly as Leo relayed it in that story? That's really for the audience to decide, I think.
And plus, we also emailed every ACT MP who was in the room for their opportunity for them to respond with no response as well. And then on top of that, we put the question to Mr. Seymour at Parliament.
Yeah, we'd asked every ACT MP for an interview, and we got back, most of them we got back no response at all. One I remember just came back with a no. But we also put that comment to Mr. Seymour at least twice in writing, along with a number of other allegations in the documentary. So we took them we took it very seriously. But at the end of the day, he's the only one who can explain what he meant. I think, that's for him to explain that, really. And we tried our very best to get an explanation from him. And the closest we got was when Mihi spoke to him on those trials.
So it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, but what you're saying is he neither confirmed nor denied. So he didn't actually say, I never said that. He just didn't respond to it.
And on the tiles, when Mihi put it to him on the tiles, he said, no, I don't believe so. I think it is his words. But yeah, Eugene put the question before that. Eugene, made a couple of attempts, put the questions to him in writing. So, yeah.
Is that something, when you hear that, and obviously you've done some things about it to check to be comfortable with broadcasting, as you're saying, do you ever go further? Do you ever send that off to his cabinet mates, the Prime Minister? Do you ever kind of go, guys, this is really worrying? Or do you just leave for them to see in the documentary as well?
Or it's a question for, I think, Mr. Seymour and the ACT Party rather than the coalition partners. No, we hadn't considered putting it to them or raising it with them.
I want to play, unless there's anything from you, Chewie, about that bit, or else I'm going to play the last clip, which is the bit on the tiles. And it all kind of comes together now because we've had the information, seen the documentary and seen ACT's version of it as well. Do you want to ask anything else, Chewie, before we push play on that bit?
No, let's get to the tiles.
Let's get to the tiles. Sorry, I'll just turn that off and bring this up and do lots of things at the same time. Here we go. So this is, for people who haven't seen the documentary, the end of the documentary, or near the end of the documentary. Many of us saw this clip a few weeks ago. We showed it on this show about you trying to get an interview with Mr. Seymour. One of the things I commented on the night we showed it, Mihi, and I'd love a response from you at the end of this, is we found it intriguing how no other journalist wanted to interrupt you. They just kind of let you go and stood back, which we thought was a fascinating observation. But we might talk about that at the end, just let people see the full version of it.
I wish you all the best with your taxpayer-funded crackpot documentary. We've seen your questions, and I think you're a joke.
You say that you're the party of democracy. In the spirit of democracy, when am I meant to get a word in to do my job?
Excuse me. Hi folks, how you going?
Did you say to an ACT candidate that the reaction to your treaty policy would be like civil war?
No, I don't believe I've said that.
The work you did in Canada on Indigenous policy, are you using that as a roadmap here for ACT's treaty policies?
I didn't do any work on Indigenous policy.
Do you still share the views of Dr. Tom Flanagan?
Look, I think he's a professor of politics who's written a lot of things. I think some of them are very right.
Which ones?
Well, he's a guy I haven't actually seen for over a decade.
His Indigenous policy?
Well, again, I'm not familiar with all his policies, so...
Well, you quoted him in your book.
Well, you may well have done, but...
And the ACT School of Politics asked for people to read about him.
Well, he's written a book about how to campaign, which is what it was about.
How about Paul Bunner? He claims residential schools in Canada is a bogus genocide claim.
I don't know who that is.
As the editor of C2C Journal, you platformed him and you quoted, thankless task of setting the record straight. So, is the Canadian residential schools a bogus claim?
10 years ago when we published lots of people.
And just a few years before you came into politics here.
Not everybody that edits something actually agrees with everything that people write on their banner.
But you did, you agreed with it. You said the thankless task of setting the record straight.
Yeah, well, in that case he was. But
in 2023, I
Look,
asked
folks,
you if you
I
had
tell
any.
you what, I'm here and happy to take any questions
In
from people
2023,
Please,
who are
I asked you
asking
if
someone
you
help
had
me.
connections
Yeah.
to the Atlas Network,
All
and
right.
you said no. So, do
Well,
you?
the Hack Party does not.
No,
All
I
right,
said
folks,
you.
look,
I said you.
I'm here to
I
take
said you.
questions.
Did you?
I'm here to take questions from people about serious matters, not crackpot conspiracy documentaries.
What conspiracy am I a crackpot of?
Several.
You invited plenty of debate for the
Right.
Treaty Principles Bill,
Yeah.
but you refused to sit down with people and talk.
I'm happy to sit down with any rational
No, I've
person and
asked
talk.
you many
You're a
times.
conspiracy nutter.
Yeah, that's the end of the tiles. And as I said, when you have that full context of the documentary behind it, a lot of those questions now make sense. The question you asked him about Atlas, you asked it again. The ACT Party does not have links to Atlas, he says, which of course you asked, what about you? It's a bit like the other day when he said the taxpayer will not be paying for my trip to do the Oxford debate, but no journalist said, oh, it's somebody else. Who else is paying for it? Now, there was always this sort of, is there another question out there? What did you get out of that interaction with him on the tiles, Mihi? What did you find out, if anything?
Oh, well, that's just what we have to do. So, yeah. So the purpose for travelling to Wellington that day is to exhaust every opportunity with the person who we're doing the story on, just in case they rethought it and wanted to actually say something. That's what I got out of it, is the opportunity to, kanohi ki te kanohi, face to face, put those questions to him, and allow him the space and opportunity to respond if he wanted to, if he had changed his mind. That's what we got out of it. And I think we played this documentary with a really straight bat, and so it was early on our discussion was that we wouldn't cut things up, would put whole chunks of things in so the audience and the viewer could see it for what it was, and it was fair.
Yeah. And what about that point that when you got in there and just went hell for leather, all the other journalists seemed to not literally take a step back, but they seemed to be like going, you do your thing. We're here just listening as well. Did you get the sense that they were sort of like, yep, go, you can keep going?
Honestly, I hadn't spoken to anyone before we got there, except for Claudette Hoeti earlier on, just to say hi and the rest of it. And so no one really knew what we were doing. But we have turned up to Parliament, Annabelle and I, by ourselves, and they're like, oh, what are these two here for? Must be something they're doing for a documentary, So they're familiar with us, but they never know what we're doing. I just don't think I gave a split second. Like, I knew that you know that when you're on those tiles anyway, you have to be really quick on your feet, and as soon as you take a breath, then someone else is in. So I don't know if the rest of the gallery didn't have any questions, was waiting for me, or whether I just didn't give them an opportunity to get in there.
I think because they're there every day, and because they know that we only come down for a very specific reason, that they, the whakawhanaungatanga of journalism comes to the fore. They recognise that, that we have very limited opportunities to speak to these politicians, and so with good collegial manners, they allow Mihi to get in there and put all the questions to them that we need to, because they know that they'll be there, the next day, and the day after that. Whereas for us, we like, we're one-hit wonders down there. So we appreciated that that they let us get those questions in. But I had such admiration for Mihi that day, because when you're in the press gallery, they're asking questions, but they're all singing off the same song sheet. They know what the news of the day is. Everybody's looking at the same issues that are coming up in the House or whatever. And so none of your questions, I assume, would really come as a surprise to each other. But when you're, asking one of New Zealand's most senior politicians about a whole lot of random stuff in front of the whole press pack that nobody else knows about, it could be easy to lose your nerve. But Mihi didn't, and she just smashed out a whole lot of great questions, and I think it's a really special part of the documentary.
Yeah, that was very cool. Chewie, you got something to say, sir?
I don't think I've ever seen David Seymour so flustered, which I think is why I enjoy that footage as much as I do, and why I have watched it as many times as I have. We've commented on the show a couple of times in the last couple of weeks that the ACT Party seem to be in the habit of posting up footage and thinking it's a win, when that isn't how it's received. They did it in the week just gone with the John Campbell interview. They seem pretty happy to put up that footage that they recorded of this interview, thinking it was somehow a win for David Seymour. How much work is the ACT Party social media team doing for you guys?
Well, it was really helpful for us because their audio is so great.
Yep.
And so we were able to use their audio. Yeah, it's great audio. Mr. Seymour wears a audio pack just under his shirt behind his tie, and it was, yeah, we didn't need a soundie that day. So it was helpful in that regard. Look, I think that the reason they put it up is because, you know, that's just what they do every single day. They've got their own kind of ACT Party YouTube channel happening, which is interesting in itself, because at Parliament and in journalism there's a set of rules that we have to abide by, but we're now in new territory where political parties, and not so much the politicians but their staff, have become kind of camera operators and soundies and editors, and they are cutting together bits and pieces of the media. So things have really changed in the last five or so years. It's interesting territory.
I think also the ecosystems are getting smaller. Sorry, that's the wrong word. The kind of bubbles are getting smaller, because we've seen a couple of times in the last while about the media that ACT voters are more and more likely to just consume ACT content. And like we saw David Seymour again, Mr. Seymour, on 30 with Guy and Espiner, just lying about their YouTube numbers, just lying about Guy and Espiner. Oh, he'll be lucky to get he's lucky to get 8,000 views, he said. So we showed it, 103,000, 45, he just lies. And then got asked, oh, when you put a clip up, what does it do? Oh, it gets between 20 and 30,000 with no effort at all. Their views have got 2,000, 3,000, 5. But no, only his people are seeming to get his content, and those tribes and those bubbles are getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, and people are just believing what these people say. And I guess it's across all politics maybe, but we're talking about David Seymour. They're just believing it, and so they're making their base maybe stronger and stronger and stronger to be loyal to ACT. And I don't know, will it get smaller and smaller and smaller, meaning where their focal point is, and they won't end up seeing these things, and they think it's a win, Chewie, because they've made a journalist look, they've dismissed a journalist, and that's all they care about. They don't actually care about what the journalist is saying. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm interested, any of you, the three of you, what surprised you about we're wrapping up now, by the way, just so you know. What surprised you about making the documentary? Did you get a shock or a surprise at anything? Annabelle, what about you? Anything surprise you?
Did anything surprise me? I have to admit I was surprised by the exchange between Mihi and Mr. Seymour, and that he called her a crackpot conspiracy theorist so many times, because he's a formidable debater and he's excellent at communicating his ideas and his beliefs. And I thought using such pejorative language to dismiss her questions was an interesting choice from someone who is able to, communicate in a less, dismissive tone.
What about you, Eugene? Anything surprise you from the doco?
Well, that exchange and the fact that just the complete lack of engagement from the ACT Party, their MPs, and Mr. Seymour himself was surprising and disappointing, frankly. But I thought that Leo Foley did what he did what he said on the box, if you like. He wanted to explain to people what goes on behind the scenes within the party, and to that extent, he did. He explained that whole idea of the School of Practical Politics and the prescribed reading and so on. I thought they were interesting insights to me.
Mihi, anything jump out at you?
Honestly, when I went to the hikoi in Pōneke that day, I have never seen anything like it, and I don't think I'll ever see anything like that ever again. And you had to really be in the heart of it to really feel it. And I saw people from so many different walks of life, people who I never thought would ever leave Fielding, where I was from, to get up there in hikoi. You had queens and rangatira and kohanga kids, and and the feeling that the wairua that was at that hikoi really, it kind of shocked me, to be honest. And and also how dangerous it was. I've got to say that. I thought afterwards, I don't know if it's Parliament's job, but it was someone's job to keep people safe, and it was really, 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 really dangerous in the centre there. You couldn't move. It took an hour to, I don't even know where people went to relieve themselves and things like that. There were kids. Honestly, it was just too much. It was so hot, and I thought, yeah, in terms of manaakitanga, looking after people, that many people are coming. Yeah. Sorry, that's just a sidebar that I've talked to lots of people, and I thought, was that even safe? I don't think it was safe. But yeah, that was the hikoi for me. In that whole period of filming, the hikoi was the one in Wellington. It blew me away, just how many people and the depth of feeling.
Hey, thanks so much for giving us some time tonight, guys. Does anyone want to, Annabelle or Eugene or Mihi, is there anything you want to leave the audience with? Anything like what's coming up next? Is there anything we need to know? Anything we've missed from this conversation that you think would be important for people to know?
I just really want to say that the engagement on this story has probably been the greatest engagement we've ever experienced. Wow. And whatever your thoughts are, I feel like so many of them have been not just like a comment, like, oh, that was good or that was bad, because that's what you often get, but actually massive chunky cohos and paragraphs of what people's thoughts are and what they've taken away from it. So yeah, just thanks to people who have taken time and shared their thoughts and being part of the wider conversation, really, which is the online digital conversation. We appreciate it. Yeah.
Well, and that still goes on in the chat. Kaimatara says, great doco. I noticed stuff I exposed last year. Seymour Bunner. How much do Indigenous like me, Tui Spider Hoof, help to make your work smoother? Oh, that's a question. Do you ever engage with independent journalists, and do they help you guys do and find what you're doing? Or I guess you're all independent journalists. You work for yourselves, don't you? Basically.
Annabelle's on mute. Annabelle's talking, but she's on mute.
Yeah. Annabelle, you've got to unmute your microphone there. Hey, the sound tech's away today.
I think something's happening to her thing. I think what she was going to say is that, of course, we are talking and with other journalists and all around the place. It's important that we we get out there and that we're always sharing information and sharing thoughts. And it's been a really difficult time in the industry, and we've had lots of wānanga about how we're going to save the industry, all those kinds of things. And in that we talk about how do we strengthen the things that we do. So everyone who's doing journalism, whether it's on your own platforms or on the big platforms, is helpful to all of us. And of course, we're over it. We see it, and we're watching it.
And lots of love for you guys. Thank you guys for breaking the story. That's in there as well. Superb journalism on the tiles. Yeah, people are loving the work, and people saying, yep, they find that Leo was credible as well. A bunch of other comments in there to say that Leo was credible as well. But we'll oh, I've got a big echo then. We'll let you guys go, and we'll wrap up with the online watching whānau. Thank you so much for joining us. And it's still best place just to get it on RNZ and on YouTube if people want to check it out, because there will be some people watching who haven't seen it. Those little clips might intrigue them. Is that the best place to go? Mata on RNZ?
Yeah, or YouTube.
Or YouTube. And you got any have you got any like teasers for what's coming up next? Do we know, or is that all secret squirrel for a while?
How do we tease that one? It's a goodie.
Oh, really?
It's another goodie.
Oh, okay. We'll stay looking.
Yeah,
Thanks,
I mean,
guys.
honestly, if I gave you a little tiny bit, you'd work it out really quickly.
Okay, that's fine.
So we won't.
Secrets.
We won't.
Secrets.
Secret squirrels. Anything you want to end with, Chewie, before these guys take off?
I once again, I just want to echo, thank you so much for being so generous with your time tonight. We've had so much discussion around this documentary, so it's been great to have you guys on tonight to sort of underline the questions that we've had, and just really, it's been a privilege. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us, guys, and we'll talk to you sometime soon.
Okay.
All right.
Almighty.
All the best.
Almighty.
Yes, folks.
And then it was 2. Oh, it's just 2 of us now.
Oh, the disappointing tale.
It's like everyone's gone home.
Oh, that
Wicked.
was great.
Wicked. Yeah, okay. I was going to do some super chats, but you want any reflections before we do that?
Just, I mean, it's always good to see the whole team, like
Yeah.
that it isn't just Mihi just hard charging around by herself. That there is the amount of work entailed to something like this. There are a lot of great comments for their other work as well, the spin-off and the excellent New Zealand War series that they've been involved with as well. But I mean, I just reflect back when we've had so much loss in the journalism sector, and we worry about the state that the media is in.
Yeah.
That these deep dives, these well-researched pieces that I think someone like David Seymour is afraid of.
When
Like,
because he
to
turned,
rattle him.
and when he
are
turns
so important.
turns into a name caller, crackpot. It's like, well,
Yeah.
in a schoolyard, when someone starts calling names, you're like, you've lost the debate or the conversation here. And it does look like David Seymour sometimes. This is what it feels like to me. Sometimes it feels like David Seymour is the live embodiment of the Twitter
Mm.
conversation. Chat. You're a dick. It just feels like that's his MO right now. He is the walking and living embodiment of a Twitter thread and the seriousness that is not.
I think one of the things that David Seymour, as you quite eloquently said last night, he is a little bitch. But part of that bitch persona, I guess, is the fact that he is an effective politician. Now, I'm going to clarify this. I'm not saying he's a good person, because we know he is the worst person in the world. But he is a savvy political operator, because he has been able to take a fringe group and get just an inordinate amount of power for their I guess market share of the electorate. But I think he believes his own hype, and I think he's very good at staying on message and staying on an effective message that he knows will resonate with people. So when someone gets inside his reach and rattles him like Mihi clearly did on the tiles, it ruins that image that he is this king debater.
He does look like a little bitch.
He does look like a little bitch. And then sometimes he gets on an airplane and goes to another country just to prove that in another time zone he can be an ineffective debater and a little bitch. So,
And you could even
say
say he becomes a mass debater, like a really big one in another city.
imagine being an international
Yeah.
Little bitch.
Liam says lost a bet. Fair enough. Thank you very much for that. Noah says got my tax refund. Thanks to all for the work you do. Thank you. No, it's very generous of you.
Great profile image too, by the way.
Bubba says this is our late fee, Chewie. We seem to be busy. Yeah, you know, every time we have guests, we're always a couple of minutes because just checking everything working. All right. Kiwi Bird BHN is never late, nor are they early. They arrive precisely when they need to. That's Gandalf, isn't it? Precisely at the right time. Something like that. Donna says, nice to have you with us, folks. And so great meeting my hairy whānau on Friday. Took me an hour to find my car, and I wasn't even drunk. Fair enough. Just a stranger with a playlist. Hi, Mihi. Can you please credit Kaimā Tara for some of the information they revealed about the Atlas Network? Okay. Kiwi Bird Mihi, please continue to chase David. Just a stranger with a playlist. We won't guarantee to read all your super chats. Is a cop-out, Pat. Not cool. It's all right. I guess what I'm encouraging you is to not make one. And we do read out all the super chat. Well, actually, you know what? Like, I'll just say something now. Not that I'm going to be narky about this one. There's no guarantee we'll ever read. Like if someone put through some kind of racist, homophobic, I'm not going to read it out. Something defamatory, I'm not going to read it out. So, yeah, just because you do a super chat doesn't mean it's guaranteed to be read out. But when we have guests, all I'm saying is if you do a super chat with a question, that doesn't guarantee that question will be asked. Not that we won't read it out, like we're doing right now. Rajan Mihi, can you confirm Seymour is the worst person? Pat, were you at Eastern Beach last Saturday? Yes, I was. Gus.
Oh, you got
Sprung.
someone crouched in the dunes with a spyglass.
Yes, Eastern Beaches in the Howick Pakuranga area of Auckland, and I was there with my wife and her son and his wife, having a little walk after we had lunch up at the Howick Village. Late fee, says Vanda. Nikki says, hi, late. Sorry, didn't say hi. I just put that hi in there because I felt he was saying hi. Wasn't sure about it. It's in the ballot. We can confirm that ACT candidates were warned about appearing on our format. On the basis, it's your choice as it's digital. Most enjoyed our show format. Orsomasaurus, Mihi, how do you feel? I guess I kind of asked that question, didn't I? How did it feel when the press scrum fell silent and let you have so many free tilt at David? Because that was gold. Another one from Kaimā Tara. Johan Norberg from Atlas spoke with disdain about Te Tiriti, calling it unusual in Western civilization on the doco Trailblazers, the New Zealand story. Melanie Thompson, late fee Anno. Is that a kissy face? Not sure. The danger of mouse. The hikoi woke me up to the super BS this government is. That's interesting. As much as I already knew. Yeah, the hikoi actually woke a lot of people up. And I know for us, we saw we jumped on some algorithm around the hikoi. I'm not sure why. We didn't stay on it, but there was a real, I think they woke a lot of people up there. Not saying because of us, but I think that a lot of people who were looking hit a peak and got really engaged around that hikoi. So yeah, I think that's, and someone's asking just before we go, Liam wants to know when will BHN stress balls be available? That's actually not a bad idea. I quite like a stress ball, as you guys know. That's not a bad idea. Yes, Chewie.
On the hikoi thing.
Yep.
As a man of 45, who has watched the news and just watched how various hikois and Māori protests have been portrayed in the media over the decades. I think there has always been a thing of like, here are some selected file images of the usual suspects for protest, and it's always a fringe movement or that sort of thing. I think when we had something like what we did with the Treaty Hikoi this year, was that you couldn't pass off that many people as a fringe movement. There was just such just on numbers, right? And this is one of the things that comes across with protest. if you are able to stand up and put your face and your body and your words into a movement, it gives permission for other people to do the same.
Yeah.
And it was such a diverse rally that people could see people like themselves in there. And I think that has given permission. Maybe it's just a change in our society over the decades as well, for people with a face like mine that live in a place like I do to have an opinion that is pro-Māori.
Yeah.
We've had Crunchy Crunch on in the chat today, saying all the right things about, well, we're all one people and it should all be equal, and those are all very, very good words, and only really apply if you're completely ignorant to this country's history. And this is one of the things like David Seymour want to change with their curriculum changes and their attention in early childhood and education. They don't want to talk about the history of this country. They don't want people to realise the inequities, the injustices that have scattered right throughout our history, because it pulls away from the fact that we're all equal and we all get treated the same. Because anyone with eyes to read and a brain to think can see that that's not true. So how can we be equal if we don't fix those things first?
Yeah.
And this is why David Seymour is floundering like he did on the tiles, because he is losing.
Yeah.
And all he's got is his little Facebook echo chamber, saying that no, he's the big boy with the big brain and the fast words. And
who's a big boy? Who's a big boy, Mr. Seymour? Who's a big boy?
What's on the word of the day calendar today, David? Buys and
boy.
time. And then along comes Mihingarangi Forbes to absolutely ruin his shit.
Yeah. That was a very eloquent and lovely, thoughtful feeling. What I'm going to do now is show you a portal to the multiverse, and everyone's going to freak out. I'll do that in a sec, but first of all, the danger of mouse. It's got nothing at all to do with what we're talking about. I'm totally now wrapping up. Okay. The danger of mouse. I used to watch mainstream media, then the internet, in the world. All right, are you ready to see the multiverse? I actually would like to see the chat. Worried. I might just put it up, and the multiverse is who hosts this show in the multiverse. Do you want to see it? Do we want to see it?
I'm scared, but yes.
Here we go. You ready?
Hang on.
I told you.
Hang on. That's the same background as you've got. You can't get that past me. Does this mean that you're off being an economist somewhere? Is this like a Freaky Friday type thing?
This is the multiverse.
I did know that Craig was in town today.
Look, I like Brother Mun's comments. What's happening? Doesn't it just goes to show how cute and sort of childlike this man is? Because look at the size of that microphone next to his gorgeous little head compared to my big fucking melon.
You do have a melon.
Oh my gosh! Look, I told you the chat would go crazy. Yes, there is a reason for this. Mr. Rennie is in Dunedin tonight, and his show this week is going to be. He's going to Christchurch to speak with Barb Edmonds to a group tomorrow night. They're going to get the audio and video from that, and that's going to be his podcast this week. And so while he was in Dunedin, he came into the studio and recorded his intros and outros. So it's not that big of a scale, but I just knew with no explanation, someone would go, "Holy shit, what's going on?" Look, even me.
Yes, he was. I believe he was giving a talk on the Robin Hood budget, the reverse Robin Hood budget. At the library today, and from the looks of the Facebook page was very well attended. So
no, we didn't get a photo, but there was a lot of dog action today when Craig was around. So I'm sorry. I know this is really unimportant, but I think it's funny, so I thought I'd show it. So there you go. So Craig's podcast this week is going to be a speech that he's making in Christchurch tomorrow night with Barb Edmonds that he promises me Nikki No Boats gets mentioned several times using those terms, Nikki and No Boats.
Fantastic.
So there you go. All right, team. As we said, there is a. See, the other thing about that. Look, I'm an ogre. I'm a throwback. No one in my family is over 6 foot. One of the things on Friday night that several people said was, "Oh my gosh, you're a lot larger in real life." I mean, look at me. Look, you can see the whole back of the chair for him.
Pat,
And look,
well,
and look at
anybody that met you on Friday.
and look at me. I'm not on a
Now
chair.
I'm gone.
There's no
I'm gone
chair
now.
at all. Sorry.
Anybody that met you on Friday can attest to the fact that you're a big unit.
And that I'm better looking than you. Oh, that was just one person. Eh?
Well, look, I said unit, not eunuch.
Yeah, but
So
we've got a lot going on this week, actually, team. I'm chasing some of the millionaires for humanity, talking about the richest families in New Zealand. Mr. Luxon, and we're not going to do the story now, Chewie, don't get all excited. Mr. Luxon came out today talking about the richest people, and there's some interesting things to look at there. Yeah, bunch of bits and bobs we're going. I'm very grateful to Mihi and her crew for reaching out and for us getting that together. Hopefully, I guess my only thing is hopefully that there wasn't too many voices for you guys. I loved it. I loved having lots of people and lots of chat, but sometimes when you have more people, like there were some gaps here and there, hopefully you still got the best of all of us and enjoyed that. So that's us for tonight anyway. Yeah, maybe we should go home now, Chewie.
Yep.
Oh, hang on.
Yep.
Do you know what I got? You know what I got said to today by some absolute troglodyte troll? I put up a tweet today, something about people with no skin in the game, talking about this world of politics and stuff. And some person actually went, "Well, what skin have you got in the game?" And I'm just like, oh God. Did I want to say making 3 podcasts, doing this 50 hours a week, actually planning, paying, doing these things? It was kind of hilarious. It was kind of adorable, actually, because they think they're big and strong. They're big and strong and scary. That was a big sigh, sir. You all right? Do you need a cuddle?
Oh, look, all right, tangent time.
Oh,
There is
God,
so
no,
much
no,
going
no.
on. There is so much going on at the moment. The stuff in LA, stuff with the Freedom Flotilla to Gaza. And for some reason, News Talk ZB stories are popping up in my algorithm again. And I see the comments. And it's exhausting because people are so dumb and they don't want to have a discussion. They really don't. So don't make the mistake that I made of going in and making a comment about electric cars or whether Greta Thunberg is just doing it for internet clout. It's just not worth it. These people do not want to have a discussion. Save your energy for the people that you can interact with in the real world, because there's so many bots and fucking AstroTurf accounts that who knows what effort you're wasting.
The crunchy you're talking about, is that the person in the chat now saying white man with no money, you have no skin in the game, or is that sarcasm, or is that the crunchy?
No, the crunchy fell down the stairs about 15 minutes ago.
Okay. Just wondering, because I was going to say that crunchy gave us 2 super chats. That'd be a strange thing for a crunchy to do. All right, team. We'll be back again tomorrow night with another edition. Big Hero News. I don't know what it's going to be about. It'll be fun, though.
Help us settle a debate, whether it be thoughtful or funny, even if we're all creatures of hate. It's a fine line that we're walking together. For better, push aside the temptation to berate. Let's take a note of the corners we stand in. As many points as the hairs on my chinny chin chin. When the news that we're watching is hairy, knowing all the things that we need to be wary of. Like the rich have their hand out for rewards, while the many have to work out what they can't afford. And the rest of us ain't paying attention, or maybe have questions we're too worried to mention. Other media is still dwelling on trivial facts, vetting peas from the rice and the mice from the rats, and picking and choosing a war puff to
Don't have too much more to add for that tonight, Chewie. I'm kind of all done and dusted. I is tonight. Anything from you, sir?
No, it's not nice time.
It's no nice time. And let me just guess. There's no air horns tonight from you to get in trouble with your missus. That's not happening tonight.
No, I did too many. I got in trouble.
We'll catch you all tomorrow night, team. See you at 9 for the next edition
Cheers, fam.
of Big Hairy News. Hooroo.